you have to have a basic understanding of all levels of the business. To put together your deal, you have to have a basic understanding of what is it going to cost to get the property where I need to get it? What is the basic analytics for cash flow, which by the way is income minus expenses. It's not hard math to learn, but you need to know what all the expenses are associated. You become a good operator when you're comfortable writing your own contract and you can hit your goals. If you know how to buy a deal, manage a deal, and exit a deal successfully, you can write a good contract pretty much every time.
Welcome to the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Axel Ragnarsson, and on this show, I dissect how seasoned multifamily investors started, built, and scaled their businesses. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. Joining me this week is Christian Osgood, who I've actually had on the show before. He came on with his partner, Cody Davis, probably about 12 months or so ago, and it's been a while since they were on the last time. And I wanted to bring Christian back on the show to dive back into a topic that he is an expert in, which is seller financing and creative financing. And we spent a lot of time in the first episode, the first time he was on the podcast, we spent a lot of time on seller financing as it relates to getting into the tactical specifics of how to structure seller financing, how to propose it to the seller, how to negotiate with the seller. And we touch on that in this episode as well, in terms of, what terms do you propose to a seller? How do you move those terms around to solve seller problems? And we get into a lot of very specific tactical points around seller financing in this episode and creative financing in general. And the reason I wanted to have him back on to talk about this was because as rates have gone up and as securing traditional financing has become more challenging, from local banks, local credit unions, et cetera, more and more investors are looking into seller financing as a way to get deals across the finish line. So I think this is a topical episode for all the investors out there. But we also talk about other topics in this episode as well, such as the importance of staying in your lane as an investor. We talk about some learning lessons or some lessons that Christian learned from doing a deal that was kind of outside of their lane, even though it made sense on paper, and some of the challenges he's had with that, which I think is going to be a takeaway for everybody that's listening. We get into how they've developed their operational infrastructure to manage the couple hundred apartments they've bought over the last few years. They bought a lot of real estate over the last few years, and they've also done some interesting deals like hotel, motel to multifamily conversions, which we get into. We get into a live deal analysis of a deal that they actually did, Christian and Cody, and Christian shares a lot of specifics as it relates to, what they paid, how they financed it, numbers at closing, stabilized numbers, all this fun stuff. And we get into these, a very tactical discussion around the deal structure on that as well. So for all the multifamily investors out there that really want the actual nuggets, right, in terms of how do we actually put these deals together? How do we actually structure these deals? This is going to be an incredible episode for you. And if you learn anything, please consider leaving the show a rating and review. Coming up on 275, which is a nice little milestone. Hoping we can hit that, by the springtime here. And without further ado, let's get to this episode with Christian Osgood. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. Joining me for the second time, although we have left Cody off of this show, but joining me for the second time himself is Christian Osgood. Christian, how are we doing, man?
Dude, fantastic. Good to see you again. We've stayed
Likewise.
busy since we last talked, so excited to have another episode to talk about what's new in the universe, talk some creative finance, and yeah, good to see you again, man.
Yeah, likewise. I think I should know this. I should have looked at this before I hit record, but you know what? We're going to go ahead and link the previous episode in the show notes, and then you can go back as a listener and see how long ago was we chatted. I think it was like 9 months, 12 months or so ago. We spent a lot of that show talking about seller financing. I'm going to talk about seller financing again because I think it's especially an important topic nowadays, where I think a lot of deals are getting done because there's a seller financing component given the interest rate environment. So we're going to talk about that again. We also talked about you and Cody's investing principles, which I just remember from our conversation vividly as a really interesting talking point. So that's a quick little plug for everybody who's listening right now that didn't listen to the first episode. Those were the two big topics we discussed amongst some other stuff. But go back if you really want to go listen to an absolute thorough deep dive on seller financing. We're going to talk about it in this show, but I highly recommend you go and listen to that one as well. But give everybody a little refresh on your specific story and how you got into real estate, what you guys are up to now, and kind of what the business looks like.
Yeah, well, I made the mistake of thinking, hey, I got to go to college to get a degree to save up to buy real estate. And so I started in corporate land Worked through some couple sales careers, ended up at the CoStar Groups. They own LoopNet, Apartments.com. If you watch the Super Bowl, Homes.com got like a bajillion ads, so I assume they're going after Zillow now. That sounds like their new direction. But I worked for that real estate data behemoth for 4 years. I got my salary up to about $250,000, which is a lot for some people, not a lot for others. And that $250,000 was enough salary to get me into 2 duplexes, buy my house, and the 2 duplexes got the cash flow to about covering my mortgage. So I got to this place in, a career where I worked really hard, where I'm like, okay, my real estate pays for my real estate. I'm still not rich. I'm not even close to rich. my goals at that time were I want to retire my wife and I want to build a house in Texas. And I live in a 1,300 square foot house. So I mean, like a much bigger house than the little matchbox I live in Seattle. When we started on that goal, I realized 1 duplex at a time was not going to get me there. I ran into Cody Davis, who was the 21-year-old who was working in my office. This is after I left the CoStar Group, but he was the 21-year-old in my office who had purchased 30 units, was cash flowing a few grand a month on them with a lot of upside. And I knew for a fact, because I've seen his bank statements, he had $3,000. He never spent the original 3 grand either. So I'm like, how did you turn nothing into 30 units? The 2 of us joined forces. We bought a 38-plex within the same, I think, 2-month period. We also bought a 6-plex and a 7-plex. Over the last several years, we've bought a little over 200 multifamily units throughout Washington and myself in Texas. We've bought a resort that we shouldn't have bought, seller financed. Might cover that today, might not, but
I think we got to now. I mean, that's
yeah. I think now we're obligated. Bought a resort that does financially well, but we'll go into today's episode on reasons why you shouldn't deviate from what you're already good at. And so we'll cover that. But we've done a whole lot of stuff and figured out basically how to take no money and buy literally anything. And does that mean you should buy everything? We've learned no. But we have bought quite a bit in a little less than 3 years. We've built quite the portfolio here in Washington and myself in Texas.
Gotcha. So there's a lot there. That's a lot of real estate in a short amount of time and bought using some unique strategies and unique structures. So let's just start high level, right? I know you've used a lot of different creative financing strategies to close on real estate, right? I know you guys have used private money, hard money, probably all kinds of different variations within those 2 umbrellas or verticals or classifications. But I know that you and Cody are very well known. And I know Cody was originally, right, when he started his business, for leveraging seller financing. So let's start there, because I think that's the most relevant to this discussion. And it's also relevant to a lot of folks listening that are like, okay, I can't buy anything because rates are too high and I can't get a deal to pencil at 7.5% or whatever the bank or the credit union is quoting them. So I want to go out there. I want to pitch seller financing. I want to go and, put this tool in my tool belt. I want to understand how to leverage this when I'm speaking with sellers, brokers, etc. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, let's paint a quick little hypothetical here. Speaking with a seller who's got a property, whatever property it is. I'll let you specify if you'd like to. Maybe it's relevant, but we'll just leave it aside for now. Or you're speaking with a broker, something like that, and you want to broach this subject. I think a lot of people don't understand where to start with seller financing, because there's all kinds of different components to a loan. You have term, you have rate, you have interest only versus amortizing, you have prepayment penalties. There's all these different terms. So most people are like, I don't even know where to start in terms of what do I even propose? Where do I begin? So let's start there. You're speaking with a seller, they got a deal. What are some of the things you're thinking about as it relates to where you start in terms of you're proposing seller financing to this seller? What are your go-to terms to kind of start that conversation?
Oh, that's a great question. And the fun thing is, this is the same when you're talking to a seller as when you're talking to a broker. I follow a very similar talk track. So what you're trying to do is you're just trying to establish yourself as the most logical buyer for the property. You don't start with, are you open to seller financing? That's basically like saying, hello, I have no money. You don't want to open with that, right?
Yeah.
Every single deal is done the same. It doesn't matter if it's bank or seller finance. You're not at the financing piece of the deal until you've talked about the deal. So when I'm talking to someone, I want to map out what are their motivations for selling. If it's direct to a seller and they bring up a transaction, it's okay. What are you thinking for price? Why sell now? what changes in your universe when you sell this? I really want to understand the significance behind it. I found oftentimes when someone proposes a transaction, you dive into the details too quick. You miss the underlying reason they're selling it, which could be an awesome piece of how you structure your creative finance. So I really want to know the story. And so it's taking the time to sit down and go, okay, how's the journey been with this property? What's it done for you? Why exit the property now? Tell me a little bit about the property. How is it doing? What don't you like about the property? Like, what problems are we going to be fixing when we pick it up? I know there's no such thing as a perfect property. So let's hear the story. You get all those pieces. Then I have a favorite question that asks all the other questions, which is just, how's the bank going to look at this? One, it establishes that, hey, I'm not just going to throw seller financing at you. Bank financing's on the table. More importantly, if you have a bunch of deferred maintenance, bank's not going to like that. So you're asking about deferred maintenance. If they have horrible bookkeeping, the bank's not going to like that. They're going to bring that up then. You ask a whole bunch of questions about the performance of the property by asking one simple question that also makes you seem professional. When we get to seller financing, I ask the same question, same way every time. Awesome. Okay, that's how the bank's going to look at this. Are you open to carrying a contract? I mean, that's it. You're not going to sell someone on being comfortable with seller financing. Generally speaking, they're sophisticated enough or comfortable with it, or they're not. I don't sell them on the benefits. I don't pitch the benefits. It's just, are you open to this or not? And if they're not, we try to go conventional or hard money. And if it doesn't work, I'll get back to them and say, hey, we did try all the other routes. I don't think it's going to work for us, which probably means it's not going to work for anyone else. Here's an idea of how it could work if we want to revisit owner financing. But other than that, I don't sell people on the idea. It's just get through the transaction, their motivation, how it would be financed, and just ask, are you open to this? And it's amazing how often someone is actually open to carrying a contract. I would say for us, probably about 50% of the time we talk deal, someone goes like, I haven't really thought about it, but yes, we could incorporate that. And then we're off to the races.
Gotcha. Okay, so a couple comments, clarifying question, and then I want to hop back into where when you start having the terms discussion, assuming it's a yes, we'll get to that. But
yeah,
I just want to echo what you just mentioned, right? We've used seller financing in our business. I don't think to the level that you guys have, but we've done probably 4 or 5 deals that are seller carrybacks. And we propose it to a lot of different folks. And the vast majority of the time, it's like, no, not interested in that. And you're like, understood. You want to take your money at closing and you want to go buy a boat and you want to move to Florida. Understood. That's why you're selling this, right? We're not selling it for any other reason than we want to access the cash. So as a buyer, you need to understand, like it's unlikely in just the general marketplace, looking at most of the transactions that are occurring, that one, a seller is going to have enough equity to finance a meaningful percentage of the purchase price. That's not the norm, right? You need equity typically to do this. Yep. 2, most sellers just aren't going to be interested. It's not going to align with their objective of selling the property, right? So as Christian just mentioned, asking that question is going to give you the answer the vast majority of the time. And it's rare that you're typically going to convince someone to seller finance. They have to already have a predisposition to being open to that anyways. So if it's a no, then it's probably just, you're going to go a different direction, unless it's not a financeable property and that has to be a component of the deal and the seller still is looking to transact, right? But that's a smaller percentage. Now, let's say you mentioned this to a seller and the answer is yes. Okay, I am open to carrying a note. Now we're in the position of, well, where do we start? Who's proposing the term? Like, what does that conversation look like? Are you asking questions about, hey, what kind of term would you be expecting? What kind of interest rate? Do you kind of lead with a proposal that works for you? Where do you go from there?
Well, negotiation 101, you don't want to be the one who sets the stage. I don't want to be the one to frame that. I'd rather have them let me know what they're thinking. So usually if they say, yeah, I'm open to carrying a contract, awesome. What would that look like? And sometimes they don't have any idea. Sometimes like, I don't know, I haven't done this before. I'm open to it conceptually. And then I'll propose like, all right, well, I think the deal works here. Do you have a price in mind? So at least I know what I need to set the terms for, because, if it's a higher price, the terms are going to be more favorable. If it's a lower price, I could be more aggressive on there's only so many levers you can pull. Like seller financing, the fun thing is you get to set all your terms, but unless you get into crazy complicated land, which you can, and we don't do, a lot of these contracts are very, very simple. There might be one special clause that makes the deal work a little better, but your main levers are price and interest rate. Those are the main 2 things, and you're just keeping them in balance. Can't choose your interest rate with a bank. You can't with creative finance. That's why we can do some unique deals. So I want them to set the framework. And that's why that initial conversation is so important. If I understand why they're selling, and this is a tip, you want to stack your deck in the favor stack the deck in your favor for getting a yes from a seller for seller financing. I work with people primarily, I try to meet with people who have larger portfolios. And a lot of them have owned them for a long time and they have more money than they have time. A lot of the people I buy from do not need cash right now, just realistically. Those are the people I'm meeting with. So when they bring up a transaction, cashing them out is not their main thing. A lot of them are doing estate planning. Some of them have kids who don't want to inherit the real estate. I don't do a ton of on-market transactions. I work very hard to just meet and get coffee with and learn from people who are ahead of me. People who are ahead of me in the game usually already have a lot of money, which is why I see a lot more yeses for seller financing than I think a lot of other people do. On market, people are usually looking to get cashed out. Off market, relationship based, you get a lot more opportunity to be creative. Going back to your actual question, though, setting the terms, super important that you have long-term cash flowing fixed rate debt. I mean, that is what we built our portfolio on. That's how you have market immunity. That's all you're trying to write is you go, okay, they give you a price, what interest rate works so that, and what term works where you're comfortable that you are going to get paid from day one to own this deal and hold it till at some point, usually you refinance. Now we do have fully amortized 30-year seller finance notes. You're almost never going to find that. So you just need to have long enough term to go, okay, I'm comfortable that I'll be able to get the value where it needs to be, and we can get into a new debt product at the end of whatever this balloon is. That's the whole game. It's super simple.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I think with newer people, newer investors, I should say, for some reason, there's a mental disconnect between like going and getting leverage from a bank versus the seller financing, right? I'm having a hard time maybe describing this, but I feel like a lot of people just forget that seller financing is also just debt. It's all debt, right? We're getting debt. It's just the person giving it to us is different, whether it's the commercial bank, whether it's the private money lender, whether it's the seller, whether it's Uncle Tom, whoever, right? There's somebody who's giving you the debt. So you just need to frame the deal through that lens in terms of, I can arrive at this purchase price with this interest rate, these terms around the financing, and you're fundamentally arriving at the same destination regardless of the road you take. It's just, it might be a different road. So you need to still practice the prudent fundamentals of don't over leverage, don't put yourself on a tricky timeline, right? With a short-term balloon, if it's going to take longer than that to stabilize the project. Don't borrow 100% at 10% interest rate for a deal where that's going to put you in a situation where you have negative leverage and you're in a jeopardized position. You're following all the same fundamentals. The person that's giving you the loan is just a different person. So I think it's a helpful frame to come back to that. Seller financing doesn't just magically turn a deal that wasn't a deal into a deal. I think a lot of new folks are so enamored with the idea of the seller holding the note that sometimes they make a compromised decision, whether it's terms or what they pay, et cetera, because of that fact.
But anyways, important to remember, there's no bank, which means you get to set your own terms, which means you can negotiate stupid terms and no one's going to tell you no. That is the danger of seller financing. You got to keep, you have to have a basic understanding. This is one of the things I love about it. You have to have a basic understanding of all levels of the business. To put together your deal, you have to have a basic understanding of what is it going to cost to get the property where I need to get it. What is the basic analytics for cash flow, which, by the way, is income minus expenses. It's not hard math to learn, but you need to know what all the expenses are associated. You become a good operator when you're comfortable writing your own contract and you can hit your goals. If you know how to buy a deal, manage a deal, and exit a deal successfully, you can write a good contract pretty much every time. If you're weak in any of those areas, that's where you need to find a mentor or partner up, because I've seen people write absolutely stupid deals. Seller finance. Like, I bought a property. I look at the deal. I'm like, you're going to own that for about 2 years and then you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
So I guess buy the Ferrari now because it's all going away.
And part of the challenge, right, is when you work with a bank, they have their own underwriting team. There's multiple individuals looking at the deal, verifying your assumptions. You're getting an appraisal done, right? The bank's requiring you to do an appraisal, which is a third-party valuation that is going to validate whether the purchase price you're paying makes sense or not. Regardless of your opinion on appraisals and appraisers in general, that's that's still another a set of eyeballs on the deal itself, right? To prevent you from ideally making a bad decision as an investor. So, if you're a new investor, you haven't done many deals, I'd be careful going the seller financing route because you don't have those checks and balances from a transaction standpoint like you do when you're working with a traditional lender, which again, as you mentioned, right, that's not something that people talk about that much. But we'll move on because I want to make sure we get to some other topics here. Last little tactical question. You and a seller agree, right? We got 5% interest, 80 LTV, it's over a 5-year term, whatever, some kind of simple terms. Who's actually drafting these loan docs? Like what mechanically happens to consummate that transaction?
It's PSA is going to be drafted by a broker. The basics of what you negotiate are really easy to put on a contract. For the most part, broker can get it started. Title company is going to draft a lot of the stuff. If you have anything complicated or just like stuff like the note and deed of trust, is going to be drafted by a real estate lawyer almost every time. And that's about it. It's so simple. You take your PSA, you send it to your lawyer. There's usually going to be a 15 to 30-minute conversation with your lawyer of just, hey, this is our goal and what we were trying to do with this. I want to make sure that what we draft aligns with everyone's objectives. And then you're off to the races. You review the doc, and if you did a good job just communicating where the goals are, this is why we don't do complicated deals. You get too complicated, stuff gets messed up. We've done that. Never again. You want deals that are simple, easy to explain. That's going to help you raise capital if you're bringing in other investors. The deal is simple. The structure makes sense. Everyone can put it on paper. Good to go. But those are your three parties: broker, lawyer, title. Done. You're not spending a lot of time with any of them putting that together. It's fairly simple.
Yeah, exactly. And just echoing, simple is better because you're also signing up for a relationship with the seller because now they're your lender, right? So it's not like you're buying the property and then you're moving on and you guys don't have a relationship. You're going to be interacting every month, ideally, right? Because you're sending them a payment every month. So the easier that relationship can be as it relates to the simplicity of the deal or the loan, it's just going to make things a lot easier, right? It's going to make it a lot easier when you go to get a payoff, when you go to sell the property or refinance, so think longer term as it relates to that relationship as well. Exactly. All right. So couple hundred apartments over the last few years. You're doing, we were talking before the show. I can't remember if you mentioned it during the intro or not, but doing some hotel to apartment conversions. We're doing some RV parks. And then it sounds like you might have bought a resort that became a pain in the butt. So maybe we'll get to that. But in general, what does the operational infrastructure look like for the business now? Are you in charge of PM? Do you have a team there, a third party? That's a lot of growth in a short amount of time. What's that infrastructure look like?
That is, we're in a market, and I never advocate for anyone going into property management. It's a low margin, high headache business. That being said, we have quite a few units picked up very quickly, and there are no notably good property managers in our market, which is pretty common for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I run the PM company. My wife also works in the PM company. I have 2 other employees, one in market who actually manages a lot of the portfolio for us, that run all of the portfolio, which is a lot. Resort has its own 10 employees, and we may or may not get into that one later.
We're going to talk about the resort right after this because I think
deal.
Yeah, because we got to get into it. I got to talk about what you learned on that. But
so resort has its own headaches and its own management, but for property management, which is a bulk of what we do a lot of entry level housing. We are really, really, really good at coming in, using replaceable pieces, like, same flooring everywhere, same paints, all interiors, making affordable spaces a lot nicer than the properties around them at slightly under market rent, which is why we have basically no vacancy. So we just have better spaces for less money because we can affordably renovate all these things to look the same and look nice. We are really good at doing that. And that's what our PM company does. That is owned by me. I manage about 300 units in Grant County, Washington. Granted, 2/3 of those are mine. So easy to build a company if you own all the units. But we do third party as well. It has been a hard business. It's difficult to scale. The margins there are pathetic, but it has allowed us to control the rents and control all the things that go on in our properties, which has been extremely valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because the ability to earn outsized returns in real estate exists on a spectrum, right? I talk about this all the time. It's going to be really hard to earn significantly outsized returns if you're competing with a ton of other buyers in a core market like a Boston, Massachusetts, or a Tampa, Florida, or a Seattle, right? I'll make that assumption in your neck of the woods. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're competing in a small town and you're not competing with a lot of other buyers, the sellers are a little bit more unsophisticated. There's not as much data points, right? So there's more subjectivity around value, all that. It's going to be easier to find deals, but actually operating those deals is much more challenging because you have less people to help you with that, less qualified people. And it's like that side of the game is where we play, both of us, in terms of where, us doing deals up in these parts of New Hampshire and down in Rhode Island, you doing these deals out in the areas that you're investing in. So you kind of have to own that part of the process if you want to have your cake and eat it too. Doesn't mean it's easy though.
I found that to be true. And then we do so much renovation because we seller finance. Another way that you get seller finance deals is you have these properties that have kind of run away from people where they might not be bankable. So they need a cash offer or they need to finance. They've owned it for a long time. Maybe their kids have inherited it and they're like, no one can do this without a cash offer or seller financing. They might actually have a higher equity position. So we do a lot of deals like that. My wife, I retired her from teaching, which was my original goal in getting into real estate. She handles all the contractors, and it is a ton. At any given time, there's usually about 20 to 25 people actively working on our portfolio. So there's like on a daily basis, there's teams out everywhere keeping everything running.
Yeah, if you're in the value add multifamily space, there is just a sheer volume of work on the operational side that is hard to comprehend until you get into the game.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hire a PM, like just to, you want to go buy a 30 unit value add deal where you're going to have to renovate the apartments and you're like, all right, I got my PM to handle this. Okay, maybe they can, but it's still going to require some level of involvement from you. And it is also helpful to understand that the work they're undergoing behind the scenes to actually successfully execute a project like that, because it's not easy. It's challenging. It's oftentimes as challenging as finding the good deal, right? In terms of successfully executing a high number of renovations and doing so on budget in a timely fashion, et cetera. It's a tough part of the game. But let's talk about the resort. It's about time. So,
okay.
What happened here? What did you learn? We could keep it in terms of like high level learning lessons because you mentioned it as we discussed earlier in the show. There, you said we got out of our lane learning lesson. I think that's a great learning lesson that I've learned myself. But let's talk about that deal and maybe why it's becoming a pain in your ass. or if it is.
Yeah. So we did this early in our career. Granted, we're only we're sitting a little under 3 years of partnership, but early, we found this resort, $4.5 million. Sellers willing to carry $3.5 million at 4.5%, which is, I was like, wow, that's a lot of money at very low interest. I would love that. It's an 8-year note, which is fantastic. We bought it at about market rate, but what we learned, and it's done well, by the way, it makes money. We had the best year it's ever had. This year is its 90th year in operations. Historic waterfront cabin thing where you have these really nice upscale cabins. They all have their own hot tub, kayaks, the whole thing. It's very nice. We bought this resort, and what I found is I took all of my multifamily operators, Cody, my director of property management at the time, and I put them all in this project. So Cody was helping with maintenance, and my director of property management was actually an owner with us, and she was working on the Airbnb and the bookings. And what I found is, one, it took away from what we're best at, which is value add multifamily. We could easily be at 400 or 500 units and millions of more in profits had we just focused all of our attention on what we were good at. But two, Cody is fantastic. I would never say a bad thing about Cody. He is amazing at finding deals. He's amazing at math. He's amazing at sorting a lot of our financing. Cody is not an operator. That's why I bought the multifamily from him. It's not that he's incapable. It's not his strong suit. We put him in an operations thing. So great player, wrong thing, and took a bunch of his time, and it was not what he's good at. So he got frustrated and wasn't thriving in the role. So we ended up reallocating him, eventually bought the other partner out. And so we just ended with something that takes a ton of time, a ton of energy. And while it will make money, it doesn't make enough money at all to justify what we did. And if you're going to make a mistake, it's best to keep them under $4.5 million. And on this one, we paid market rate for it. So it's like, okay, we don't have, the project makes sense on the 8 years.
Yeah.
But a year and a half into the project, it's not like I can just sell it, because we did a debt structure that says like, hey, we're going to make a lot of money over a period of time. We can't just exit or pass it to the next person. We have to see the project all the way through. It takes a ton of time. It's a strain on my wife. It's a strain on me. It's a hassle for Cody. It just was the wrong time in our career. If we had a bunch more money and we were liquid and we had this huge, fully stabilized, optimized multifamily portfolio, we could just pay for everything to work there. Having the whole resort have to just make it on its own merits when it's not our thing, huge mistake. Would never do that again. Hospitality, as we learned, is super brutal and not fun. Would not do it again. We'll have that thing for a while, and it is beautiful and it is fun to be there, and we do get to host events and concerts and all sorts of cool stuff down there. But it was the wrong project for our team, and I think an opportunity cost that cost us millions of dollars.
Love it. And we'll move on so we don't pick the scab here, but I'll highlight two takeaways I have listening to that story that very much align with two components of my business, or two learning lessons as I've grown my business, which is, if you're going to get out of your lane, you either need to do so with someone who has been there, done that, and can point out your blind spots and also step in to help. That's the only exception. Otherwise, it's just like, stay in your lane, because it's your lane for a reason. You've become good at this one thing for a reason. If it gets easy, that's when you should be going hard versus taking a step back and looking for other things to do. And then two, when you're restricted from an ownership standpoint, where your options are limited and you basically become a forced holder, I think the business can get stressful. And that could be any type of deal, and it could be for any number of reasons. You might be using debt that has extraordinarily hefty prepayment penalties for 3 or 4 years or something like that, and you can't sell a refi for 3 or 4 years, even if it makes sense to do so. If you can't, and you're into a project that's less than desirable, that can be stressful, right? Or it could be some other reason, right? Maybe there's some, you bought a LIHTC deal, a low income housing tax credit deal, and your plan is to go and convert it into market rate housing when that gets lifted, and you're under 3, 4, 5 years remaining, and you're like, I have to see it to the finish line because that's my whole business plan. That puts you in a tough spot, right? So I've, over the years, become obsessed with flexibility as it relates to debt, holding patterns, et cetera, because you're all gung-ho about long-term real estate ownership when you close something, but a lot of shit changes along the way, right? You might need that money to go and buy this better deal, or you might just not want to be in that sector anymore. You might not want to be in that neighborhood anymore. The building physically might be a total pain in the ass, and you're spending tons and tons of money on deferred maintenance and this and that, and next thing you know, you're like, this isn't financially performing as well as I'd like. I'll let somebody else deal with this, but you can't because of these other reasons. So long story short, highlighting those learning lessons because I've made them myself. And when you look at the opportunity cost, it's where maybe keeps you up a little at night, but it's all part of the journey, all part of the game. And I think a lot of people learn that just in different ways and at different times. All right, so I want to make sure that we talk about an actual deal, because I think this will be a fun little exercise as it relates to, let's talk about how we found this deal. And specifically, I mentioned this to you pre-show, pre-recording here. I'd like it to be one where there's a seller financing component, because I think that'll be helpful for the audience. But we'll take it kind of full cycle here. Where did we find it? What was it? How was it financed? Walk us through the story, and then if there is some kind of resolution at the finish line, we can get into that. But let's actually talk about a real life situation as it relates to how you've employed some of the tactics that we've talked about today.
Okay, this actually transitioned really well. So this is an example of getting out of your lane in a sensible way. So we are doing some hotel conversions. I just bought a 33 unit. That was hard money. Right before that, I bought a seller finance 24 unit hotel, super nice building, brick exterior, paved parking, huge office space. Really love the building. Excellent location, right in the middle of downtown. We picked this 24 unit hotel up for $1 million seller financed. 5% interest. It was, trying to remember. This one was 300,000 down. So they wanted 15%.
70
down.
LTV.
Yeah. This one was really, 70%. Yeah. So 30%, now it's a higher down payment, but not bad. The actual, like in this market, multifamily units on the very low end for entry level go for 100, 110 per unit. So you're coming in 24 units for $1 million. I was like, okay, this is insanely good. We walk all the units. This was a failed hotel. Oh, there's dog shit underneath some of the mattresses. They just swept it under the mattresses. There was blood stains on a majority of the mattresses. It was just a super gross operation. But you look at the actual building, nice floors, clean paint, nice appliances, structurally fantastic. I was like, this is going to be the easiest conversion of all time. We bought it, talked to the city. The city's like, oh, we don't really want to rezone it, but you can put long-term leases in it and you can run it as multifamily. We don't care at all how you run it. You don't have to do any changes, add some kitchenettes, run it multifamily. We're good for that. So really easy conversation with the city. We actually found some lenders who, at the end of the day, they're like, well, look, you're creating low-income housing. As long as the leases are there, we don't care if it's a hotel or multifamily. The designation does not matter to us. So we can pull this into long-term conventional financing, which is awesome. And that's the project. So bought it, again, 30% down. We brought in a capital partner, talking about going out of your lane, who owns, I think, 14 hotels. And he's converted 3 or 4 of them to multifamily. Several of those are in this market. He came in. He was liquid for the whole thing. And we wrote it. This is my favorite deal structure, by the way. We went 50-50. 50% of his money, so 150, went towards his equity. The other 150 was a loan to Cody and I, which we then put into the deal. If you're running a cost seg, you can't depreciate more than you have in the deal. If you borrow the money and put it into the deal, it is now your money. So on an IRS and a tax level and a depreciation level, it is a fantastic structure where someone else brings all the money. You hold it as a note for your portion. Everyone contributes in proportion to their equity. That is one that is super easy to explain to your CPA and super easy for them to explain to the IRS. So this is how we did it, why we did it. Capital accounts are balanced. Everyone can claim depreciation, and the deal is funded with $0 out of our pocket. At refi, our note will be cleared, they will be made whole, and then we'll all own the deal with $0 in the deal. That is a very simple seller finance structure. It's my personal favorite structure. That's how we did this. As far as the project, we got the building partially leased. We got the renovations done, started leasing it up, and then Grant County had the coldest winter it's had in about 45 years. We had 19 of 24 rooms get flooded.
Oh, jeez.
Amazingly, only one of those had a tenant in it. So we only displaced one person who I put in our new hotel. So that totally works. So we're redoing the project, but it was going very well. And financially, I'm happy with it. Insurance is stepping up and helping us get it done. You don't want to file insurance, but once you get over $250,000, that is what insurance is there for. We're basically rebuilding them. They're going to come back a little bit nicer than before. We'll finish out the project, and we've already lined up a couple buyers who want to buy it when we are done with it. I like holding everything, but I own this with partners. The new hotel we just bought, Cody and I own it by ourselves. I would rather sell this one, take the cash, and spend it to absolutely deck out one of my other buildings I own without any partners. But that's the project there, made possible by seller finance. Excellent price, reasonable terms. I'm going to add one more thing, and then I'm going to stop rambling because I love this clause. One of my favorite clauses of all time. Hotel conversions. We buy on long-term cash flowing fixed rate debt. You cash flow exactly $0 on an empty hotel until you convert it. One of our mentees, so we have an education company called Multifamily Strategy. One of our mentees, name's Caleb Hommel, so we call this move the Hommel hack. He did a deal where he's like, it only works if I have no mortgage payments until I get the rent up. So he just put in his note, payments start in 6 months. I'm like, that is genius. It's so easy to put in a note. How do you save money? Don't pay your mortgage legally by putting it in your note. We did that on this deal just for the first 3 months. As we transitioned it, we got the final permits, we added the kitchenettes. We never paid a mortgage payment while we set it up, and then we started leasing it. That's what I'm talking about by simple clauses that make your deals work. Granted, you still have, your electric and utility bills. But if you have no mortgage while you're doing these things, that's a basic clause. And most sellers, if you're working on a distressed property or a reposition, are open to, hey, we just got a $300,000 down payment. We can wait a few months before we get a mortgage payment. We'll live off the $300,000 you just paid us for 3 months. We're good with that. Easy to pitch, and it could be an absolute game changer in your deal. So that's how we structured this deal. Clean, simple, basic structures. And away you go.
Love that. No, that's a killer deal. I'm going to have a couple of follow-ups on rents, income, reno stuff, but That's a really cool structure as it relates to structuring a note to where there's some deferred payment component to it where you start paying into the note in some capacity, and therefore you can rapidly stabilize the building, assuming that the project is, you can do that in terms of the project itself and the nature of it, but not putting so much short-term strain on the project itself or your personal finances if you're doing this without partners. Can be very helpful. I had I haven't done this myself, but I heard of a buddy of mine do it who's active in my local market. He does a lot of creative stuff. Um, he'll oftentimes pitch graduating interest rates throughout the course of a loan. So
Mhm.
where it's like he buys something, he's like, it's going to be 3 in year 1, 5 in year 2, 7 in years 3 through 5, right? And
Yep. We
he
do those a
knows as a
ton.
yeah, he knows as a buyer, I'm going to be out of this loan in a year, couple years or whatever. I'm not going to get into the higher interest rate period. Again, should plan for the unexpected, as we've talked about, and he would be able to sustain the payments at that elevated interest rate. But in the short term, his debt service is just much lower because he's paying a lower interest rate than market by some kind of gap. Seller's happy because they get their number, etc. He gets to progress through the project. He gets into later years within that loan. He's motivated to refinance. The seller likes it because it's like, I'm going to give you the 5-year balloon. I'd like you to pay me off earlier, but if you're not going to pay me off earlier, I want to get compensated for having this money out. And then that, checks off that objective and on their side of the table.
And if
So
you can't meet on interest rate, sometimes seller wants 7%, the deal supports 4, but it has value add. Those are excellent ones where it's like you can say yes to them without giving them exactly what you can come in and say, oh, we want 7%. We can do that. Day
yeah,
one, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have to be 4. Otherwise, we're going to lose money. But here's a plan of exactly how we're going to get you to your 7. And that way you can basically say yes to all their terms while still getting your own terms. There's little graduated interest rate things. Fantastic tool.
absolutely. All right, so let's talk just a couple of numbers on this deal itself, though. So do you have a sense of your projected reno costs? I know obviously pipes froze and that kind of threw a monkey wrench in there, but
Yeah.
you paid $1 million, I believe you said 24 rooms, right? Or
Yep.
units once you convert. So you got 24 units at $1 million. What do you got to spend per unit to, yeah, obviously it sounded like it was in great condition, so maybe it's a pretty low budget, but you're dropping a kitchenette and probably doing some plumbing. And then what do you achieve in rents afterwards? What do you think it'll be worth?
So 10 of the units came with kitchenettes. So those were done, ready to rent. No reno needed. For the other 16 units, we were spending, as we were doing the project, we were spending in the ballpark about 5K. The partner who came in owns a contracting company, so that saved some costs. So we got a lot done at cost. But about 5K. The kitchenettes cost about $1.50 for what we were getting. We were adding a few cabinets. The plumbing was very simple to do. We actually backed it up to the wall that already had all the plumbing. Just with the actual layout, it happened to line up where I'm like, I have a totally blank wall that has a ton of plumbing running through it. This was super easy. Flooring was good. Paint was good in all of them. Tile was good. I had 2 showers that were deconstructed at some point that needed to be rebuilt and retiled. But I mean, we're coming into these sub 10K per unit renovation and only had to
Pretty
renovate
killer.
16 of them. So I mean, yeah, it was very cheap, very easy. Another thing that we did, and I'm doing this on both hotels, they were doing monthly rentals at like $1,200 a month for 400 square feet, which is insane to me. We just came in. I'm like, this deal is like out of the park, awesome at $800 rents. So we just came into everyone who was paying like $1,250. One of them was paying $1,350. And I was like, you guys want to sign a 6-month lease at $1,000 a month? Can we just drop what you pay to get you in a long-term lease? And everyone signed it. They're like, of course we'll do that.
Yeah.
And it
No
was great
duh.
proof of concept, right? I'm like, there are people paying $13,000 a month to live in a tiny, crappy unit right now. We're going to make them nice without spending a lot of money. We're just going to make them a lot nicer. And we're going to drop their rent in exchange for long-term leases. And we're going to have this very stable building where people aren't going to want to move out of. That we don't do a lot of projects that are a home run, minus the fact that it flooded and we're redoing the project. So we're getting our second home run on the same project. But while we're doing the deal, it was just a home run project. That's an excellent price, inexpensive reno. Opportunity was there. I think the hotel conversion makes sense in our business model with entry level housing, where we know how to lease these, we know how to sustain them, we know how to manage the asset. We just wanted to partner with someone who's done the conversion before. And their take on it was city doesn't care if it's zoned hotel or multifamily. they are good with you just getting leases on it. They have a couple of banks that are okay with it. So most of the project was they're like, hey, you want to do this project right? Don't do 80% of the stuff that you think you have to do. Just get the leases done, do the property management, add kitchenettes, and we're golden. So that's what we did on that building, and it's what we're doing on our 33 unit as well. And it's been working very well for lease up.
Love that. It's a hell of a story. You might be giving me shiny object syndrome right now. Maybe it's calling up my acquisitions guy and telling him we got to go look at small hotels and motels.
There's opportunity, and I've seen some of it in Texas where the city's down for it. That is the one where due diligence, the most important piece is when you are under contract, get the written consent from the city to do what you want to do on your plan. For those who are like, this is a good idea. It is a good idea. I've seen people make a ton of money doing this. It does not work everywhere. This is not a copy and paste in every single market. It is city specific. So work specifically with your city leadership and whoever your planning department is to make sure that all of the T's are crossed, I's are dotted. But if they're a green light on it, this building's right next to City Hall, actually. They originally didn't want us to do the project. And I was like, here's what's going to happen. Do you want this area to be better? They're like, yes. I'm like, I know who else is going to buy it. And I name drop the guy who's going to buy it. And I'm like, you can have me do the project, or you can have him do the project. They're like, oh, we will give you the permits that you want. We like working with you better. I know the guy who does it. He's a total slumlord. And I was like, look, this could be slummy, or I can do it right, but you need to permit this if we're going to do it. And they said yes, and the same thing on the other one. I'm like, look, you know how I operate. This building will be better. Just let us play our game. And some cities will let you do that. Some will not. But do not mess around with the permitting thing. Get that figured out before you close.
Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is close a deal, find out that you can't execute the vision you had in mind, and next thing you know, you're running a motel, which is an entirely different ballgame. So
I don't like running a Class A resort. I can't imagine running a motel in the middle of downtown.
Yeah, that's a no-go. Cool, man. Well, this has been great. We're coming up on time, so I want to make sure I get you out of here. But just a ton of great content here. And again, for all the listeners, go listen to the previous episode with Cody. And obviously, we have Christian here, but with Christian and then his partner, Cody, because of the fact that we dive much deeper into seller financing on that episode. We obviously talked about a lot here, but we get into even other tactical stuff as it relates to, like, I think I remember us talking about literally tactically how to pitch that and really get into the nitty gritty of the conversation. So a great sequel to this conversation in a lot of ways. But Christian, how can people get in touch with you? Where can they learn more about you, follow you, reach out to you, all that fun stuff?
Well, if you want to learn everything for free, Multifamily Strategy on YouTube. Share everything there. We have thousands of videos. We put a lot of time into our YouTube channel. So Multifamily Strategy, check us out there. If you want to message me directly, I'm at Christian Osgood on Instagram. I'm also insanely active on that, more than I ever really wanted to be. But I am very much there. So reach out to me there. If you want to learn creative finance or you're looking for a mentor or a course to take, we have all of that on multifamilystrategy.com. Those are the three places to find me. YouTube's free. Contact me on Instagram. You want to take it to the next level, multifamilystrategy.com.
Perfect. Love it. This has been great. Thanks again, Christian. All the links are going to be in the show notes. And listen, man, I'm sure we'll be chatting soon, but thanks again for your time.
Thanks so much.